Hey guys, tonight we drift through the dry air of ancient Persia, where the sun clings to your skin and the wind blows warm no matter how long you wait for evening. You step into this parched world with no AC, no mini fridge humming softly in the background, just the relentless heat, rising off clay walls and stony hillsides like a second sun. Your mouth's a bit dry. Your tunic clings. You can already feel the dust sneaking into your sandals. And yet, people here somehow are eating ice cream. You walk past a narrow alleyway where a child licks what looks suspiciously like a snow cone. Nearby, a bearded man carries a chilled jug with condensation on its surface. A woman fans herself slowly next to a large domed structure shaped like a beehive turned upside down, its smooth mud brick surface catching the moonlight. It's not magic, though it feels that way. It's science. Old, dusty, slow science. But you probably wouldn't last a day in this place. Seriously, the sun alone might roast you like a kebab by noon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening from somewhere hot, cold, or floating between the two, leave a comment below with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slower now. There's no rush. Ancient Persia doesn't move fast. The day stretches. The years stretch even more. And you, lucky wanderer, have found your way to one of the oldest and strangest dreams of humankind, making cold things stay cold in hot places. Picture this. It's 500 BCE. The Achaemenid Empire is at its peak. You're surrounded by cities that glitter with tiles and gold, palaces with tall walls, and market streets smelling of dates and honey. But there's something else, something quiet and architectural, that hums beneath all this wealth, the need to cool down. And so enters the yakshul, literally meaning ice pit. These aren't fridges. They're not coolers. They're vast, whispering clay giants, rising above desert villages like upside-down cones, thick-walled, vented at the top and dug deep into the earth. You first notice one when the wind shifts. It feels cooler near it, slightly, like stepping into the shade after hours under the sun. Historians still argue whether the earliest yakshuls were purely ice storage or used also as proto-refrigerators for everything from meat to wine. What's agreed on, though, is that they worked, somehow, with no power lines. Just shape, timing, and a stunning understanding of thermodynamics passed on without equations. Step closer. The outer walls are made of sarouj, a magical blend of clay, egg whites, ash, goat hair, and lime. Yes, egg whites. This mix resists heat, moisture, and time. You run your hand across the surface. It's slightly cool, not cold, but enough to surprise you. It's like the structure is holding on to winter, months after the snow has vanished from the mountains. Inside, a deep pit, sometimes up to 5 stories below ground level. The walls curve inwards, guiding airflow, pulling warm air up and away through the narrow vent on top. At night, the temperatures plummet in the desert. The air chills. Water channels nearby, often fed by underground canets, are left shallow and open. By dawn, a thin crust of ice forms. Men rise early, shivering under their cloaks, to scrape and gather this precious layer and carry it inside the yakshul. There it lasts. Days, weeks, sometimes months. That first chill as you peek into the structure makes you blink. There's actual ice down there. Frost clings to the sides. The interior smells faintly of damp earth and old dreams. It's strangely calming, like you've stepped into a forgotten cave designed not for worship, but for waiting. You sit on the rim and dangle your feet above the cool dark. No guards. No tourists. Just you, an ancient fridge, and the quiet thrill of knowing that 2,500 years ago, someone else sat here too, perhaps sipping from a bowl of grape syrup over shaved snow. Here's a quirky side note. In some villages, the yakshul wasn't just a cold room, it was a status symbol. Wealthy merchants would pay masons to build bigger, taller, cooler versions. sometimes with poetic inscriptions about the chill of wisdom or the coldness of divine serenity. One even had a tile mosaic of a frozen pomegranate. Ice bragging rights were very real. You feel a soft breeze skim past your cheek. Could be night air. Could be the breath of history. Or maybe it's just the windcatcher tower nearby, another Persian invention we'll get to soon. The sun has fully set now. Stars begin to pepper the sky, blinking gently above the dome's crown. You lean back against the slope of the structure, its warm clay slowly releasing the heat of the day into the twilight. Sleepy cicadas chirp in the distance. A camel groans somewhere behind a wall. And the yakshal stands still. A monument to patience, cleverness, and the quiet human longing to make something stay cold, just long enough to enjoy it. You wake, or maybe you never fully slept. Either way, you're still here, next to the yakshal. The stars have shifted slightly, the moon's moved west, and the air has cooled just enough to make your skin bristle under your robe. You rise slowly, brush off some dust, and begin to walk. The path winds away from the dome, past a grove of fig trees planted by clever hands who knew how to channel underground water. The ground here isn't as dry as it looks. That's part of the magic. Then just up ahead, another dome. This one shorter, older, a little cracked. And beside it, a man, probably in his 50s, sits cross-legged on a mat. He's grinding something in a wide stone bowl, humming a tune older than language. You nod politely. He gestures toward the dome with a sideways smile and says something that might mean, "Go ahead." You approach. The structure's surface glows pale under starlight. Its curve feels almost too perfect. If an architect from the modern day tried to recreate this, they'd use 3D modeling software. But the ancient Persians? They used string, shadows, and the sun. Maybe some light bickering among masons. As you circle the base, you notice a stairwell. It leads downward, not sharply but gently. Step by step, the air grows cooler, like descending into a wine cellar. Your fingers trail along the walls, which pulse faintly with retained warmth. The genius here lies in thermal inertia. You don't need to know the physics, just the feeling. By the time you reach the base, it's nearly silent. The thick mud brick dampens all sound. The floor is smooth and slightly damp underfoot, packed with centuries of frost and melt. In one corner lies a patch of ice, still intact. You crouch beside it and marvel at how this cold has survived despite the desert above. Here's the secret no one tells you at first. These structures didn't just store ice. They made it. Wait, ice in the desert? No, it's not a riddle. Ancient Persians harvested ice by harnessing three key things: nighttime radiation cooling, dry desert air, and smart geometry. Let's break that down while you sit on a nearby ledge, sipping an imaginary cup of honey-sweetened tea. Each yakshal had a shallow pool or water channel beside it, wide but only a few inches deep. At night, the thin layer of water released its heat upward into the cloudless sky, radiating warmth away like a whisper. This process, radiative cooling, allowed the surface to drop below freezing, even if the surrounding air didn't. Add a few clear, still nights and you had yourself a sheet of ice. The Persians called these shallow trenches yakub, a poetic word somehow colder than ice. Once the ice formed, workers would rise before dawn to break it into blocks and lower it carefully into the pit inside the yakshal, where thick walls and shaded positioning kept it frozen. Historians still argue whether the earliest uses were purely functional, preserving meat, fish, and wine, or whether they were ritualistic, perhaps even luxury symbols offered to nobility during summer solstice festivals. Some archaeological digs suggest that temple complexes had mini yakshals built solely for priest use. Others believe the structures were shared communal assets, like modern ice houses in colonial towns. But you know what's even more delightful? Sometimes the ice wasn't stored at all. It was served. Shaved finely, mixed with grape molasses or saffron syrup, and delivered to nobles in silver bowls. You picture a eunuch carefully balancing a tray down a marble hallway. The treat inside? The world's earliest version of Faloodeh, a tangy, icy Persian dessert that still exists today. Here's your fringe fact of the evening. Ancient Persian poets, yes, actual bards, once compared love to the fleeting nature of snow in the month of Tyr. The implication: passion cools fast, unless you have a yakshul. You laugh softly to yourself. It's a good line. Would have made a great Instagram caption if those were a thing in 486 BCE. The man upstairs hums louder now. He started to sing. It's a gentle rhythm, repetitive but soothing, like someone sweeping the same spot slowly for no real reason. You let yourself stretch out across the cool stone. The dome above you disappears into shadow, but you can feel its presence. It holds you like a hand. And though no wind touches your face, you feel a stirring, a sense that this place isn't merely engineered. It's loved, preserved, rebuilt, tended, over centuries. There are records of royal engineers, assigned not to palaces or fortresses, but to cold domes. Their job? Monitor the airflow, replace crumbling bricks, patch cracks with fresh sarouj. They were the fridge repairmen of the empire, and yet somehow more noble. One inscription reads, "He who neglects the chill loses the favor of summer." You chuckle. Then your mind drifts. Imagine the moment that inspired the first yakshul. A particularly brutal summer, maybe. A mother worrying about spoiled milk. A trader returning from the mountains with half-melted snow and wondering aloud, what if it didn't have to melt? And someone, let's say his friend Mahmud, replied, "We'll dig. And we'll build." And they did. You yawn. And the air yawns with you, stretching out long and cool under the surface of ancient clay. You blink slowly in the gentle dark beneath the yakshul, the cold stone wall still firm against your back. The hum of the world has quieted, as if time itself holds its breath to let you rest. But above your head there's movement, soft, deliberate, and rhythmic. It draws you up, back toward the stairwell, where moonlight now slices across the upper wall like a patient blade. Step by step you return to the surface, where dawn begins to blush against the horizon, faint and apricot-colored. Somewhere far off, a rooster mistakes the yakshul for a new day's temple. You smile at the echo. The ice is safe. It's time to go deeper, into the how. You follow a narrow path past irrigation ditches that glint silver in the early light. Ahead lies the open plain, and beyond that rows of half-submerged channels running like sleepy veins beneath the soil. You're looking at the lifeline of the empire, the Khanate system. And here's the genius of it all: you can't make cold without water. So where does the water come from in the middle of an arid land where summer swallows moisture like a bored god? Khanates. These were ancient underground aqueducts, dug by hand over years, even decades, that guided mountain water gently downhill beneath the surface, minimizing evaporation. You're standing above one now. If you pressed your ear to the ground, you might hear the trickle. These channels fed everything: homes, gardens, baths, fountains, and of course the yakshuls. You reach one of the mother wells, wide, stone-lined, descending steeply into cool shadow. A teenage boy sits nearby, half asleep, holding a stick with a silver bell on one end. Every so often he flicks it. The sound is soft but deliberate, a warning to any snakes or scorpions seeking damp refuge. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. It's a long shift. Now look up. What do you see? A square tower, rising like a watchful sentinel above a low-roofed house. Slits at the top. Not a fortress. A wind catcher, or badger in Persian. This is the final piece of the cooling puzzle: airflow. The wind catcher works like a reverse chimney. When wind passes over the top, it's sucked down into the shaft, where it cools over water channels or thick ceramic jars. The cooler, heavier air then drops into the living spaces below, displacing the hotter air which escapes through other vents. It's not just cooling, it's air conditioning without electricity. And it works. Still today. Historians still argue whether the first wind catchers appeared in Persia or whether similar structures emerged independently in Egypt and the Indus Valley. But the Persian ones remain the most sophisticated, some with internal paddles or flaps to redirect airflow depending on wind direction. One wealthy merchant's house had 6 wind catchers. He reportedly referred to them as his summer servants. You step inside a modest home nearby. It's early morning and no one notices you. That's okay. You're just passing through. A woman stirs in the corner, kneading dough while her son fans embers. She pauses now and then to tilt her head, listening to the breeze shifting through the clay shafts above. The room is cool. Not cold but cool. Livable. Sleepable. You glance into the pantry, clay jars, baskets of herbs, and a small bowl covered with a damp cloth. Inside, yogurt. Still fresh. No fridge. Just earth, wind, and centuries of figuring things out slowly. There's a joke scratched into one wall. Probably added by a bored nephew. It says, "Cold is the sleep of fire." You don't quite get it, but it feels poetic. Just outside, a vendor walks by with a crate of grapes and a bucket of water. He's whistling a tune that sounds vaguely familiar. He dips a ladle into the water and pours it slowly over the grapes. A little ritual, a little performance. The water's cold. The grapes shine. He sells 3 for a coin but hands 1 to a child for free. You follow him for a while. His route takes you past more wind catchers, more homes designed to bend heat instead of fight it. Clay walls painted white reflect the sun. Courtyards brim with trees, their leaves fluttering like lazy eyelashes. Then something odd. A group of men is assembling a shallow pool near a yakshal. They build it with low clay borders and smooth the earth inside with flat paddles. It'll fill tonight using diverted water from the Kanat. If conditions are right, and if the wind sleeps, the pool will freeze. This is called yak bandin or ice-teeing. It's part science, part art, and part prayer. You spot a boy drawing symbols in the dust nearby. His father waves him away with mock sternness but doesn't erase them. Superstition still dances with engineering out here. And the sun continues its climb, soft for now but promising a punishing blaze by midday. But here in the quiet interplay of earth, wind, and water, a civilization finds peace with the elements. Not by conquering them, but by listening. The sun lifts higher, and with it, the day begins to stretch and yawn like a cat in warm sand. But here in the high desert of ancient Persia, you keep your pace slow, measured, because nothing good ever came from rushing in the heat. And besides, there's something miraculous happening tonight. You're going to watch ice form. In the desert. You wander back toward the basin prepared earlier, the shallow rectangle with tamped clay sides. It's empty now, save for a few boys shooing away curious goats. But soon water will trickle in. Not from above. Never from above. This is not a place where rivers pour from the sky. This water arrives like a whisper, drawn from deep below through the veins of a Kanat. An older man oversees the flow, his beard dyed orange from henna. He carries a smooth wooden ladle, not to stir but to test. Every few minutes he dips it into the trench, lifts it, watches how quickly the water beads disappear. It's his thermometer in a way. He knows exactly when the air is dry enough, still enough, cold enough. Tonight may be a good night. You settle in nearby, leaning against a stone wall still warm from the day's sun. A woman in the shade of a date palm offers you a piece of flatbread. It's soft, slightly smoky from the clay oven, and dusted with dried mint. You thank her with a nod. As the stars begin to gather again, curious onlookers in a sky without clouds, you watch the basin fill. A thin layer only a few inches deep. That's the trick. Too deep and it won't freeze. Too shallow and it evaporates. This is where Persian ingenuity meets patience. Historians still debate whether these ice pools originated in the Achaemenid period or were formalized later, during the Sasanian Empire. Some argue they began as wine cooling techniques that evolved. Others insist they were always meant for ice, born from necessity and perfected with generations of quiet observation. No one agrees completely, but everyone agrees it worked. Now the real waiting begins. You hear crickets. distant flutes, a donkey's bray, and silence. That special silence that comes only when an entire city holds its breath for the cold. As the temperature drops, the earth exhales. Warmth from the day escapes into the clear night sky. Without clouds to trap it, the heat flees. This phenomenon, radiative cooling, wasn't discovered in a lab. It was discovered by barefoot farmers staring at the stars. By midnight, the water's surface begins to gloss over. A skin. Then a crackle. One boy tosses a pebble. It skids. The others gasp, half in awe, half ready to tackle him for ruining it. But the ice holds. Come morning, they'll gather it in thick, muffled boots, break it gently, and carry it to the nearby yakshal in padded crates lined with straw and cloth. Ice delivery, ancient edition. You close your eyes. Not fully asleep. Not fully awake. Just resting in the warm thought that, at this very moment, a civilization is making winter and summer. You think about how this knowledge passed through generations. Not written in textbooks but in stories, gestures, and quiet instruction. Here's a fringe tidbit you'll enjoy. Some of the old ice harvesters believed the basin would only freeze if no one argued during the day. That's right. Peace in the village meant ice at night. So on ice harvest days, families spoke in whispers, vendors haggled without shouting, and even donkeys were given quieter bells. Was it superstition? Of course. But also, how lovely. In the low light, you hear a man humming a song about wind and patience. It's half lullaby, half engineering manual. And then there's movement beside you, a young apprentice. Maybe 12. He's tracing something in the dust, a pattern of circles and lines. A diagram of wind catchers? A map of the Canets? Or maybe just a doodle of a cat? Hard to tell in the dark. He offers you a date from his pocket. It's sweet, sticky, sun-warmed. You chew slowly, thoughtfully as the cold creeps in. Not a sharp cold. Not the kind that bites. This one is gentle. And by dawn, the desert will remember what winter tastes like. You wake with the sound of scraping, delicate but firm, rhythmic like a lullaby in reverse. The kind of sound that says, rise but slowly. There's work to do, but it won't shout at you. The sun hasn't fully crested yet. The sky's still the color of cool apricots, and there's a surprising bite in the air. You pull your cloak a little tighter as you approach the basin again. The ice has formed. A thin sheet but wide and proud. It glistens under the dawn light like a lake caught mid-breath. Men in long cloaks begin the harvest. They use simple tools, wooden picks, padded tongs, coarse linen blankets. Everything is slow. You can't rush ice or it punishes you with cracks and useless slush. The first block is lifted. It's small but solid. The boy from the night before is part of the crew now. He clutches a leather strap, guiding it under the ice with careful fingers. He's not allowed to carry yet, just to watch. And that's enough. That's how it begins. You follow the procession as they carry the glistening bundles toward the yakshal. The path is packed with straw, softening their steps and absorbing any melt. There are no wagons, only backs and balance. One misstep and the morning's work vanishes into the dust. They reach the wide mouth of the yakshal, lift the lid of the trapdoor, and descend into the dark belly of the dome. The temperature inside hugs them like a memory of January. Block by block, they build their pyramid, ice stacked in interlocking layers, each separated by rush matting to prevent melt and encourage airflow. These people understood thermodynamics the way a poet understands silence. They couldn't name it, but they spoke its language fluently. Want a historical fun fact while the laborers work? The ancient Persians likely stored more than just ice in their yakshals. Dates, melons, cooked rice, even cooling wine amphorae. One dig near Yazd uncovered a sealed clay jar containing what appeared to be an early yogurt sorbet. Modern scholars still argue if it was a dessert or just lunch gone forgotten. You sit beside the yakshal's entry ramp and sip from a goatskin flask of water that was cooled overnight near the basin. It tastes better than anything you've ever had in a plastic bottle. Cold, earthy, alive. And now comes your favorite part. The treat. When the blocks are safely stored and the tools wiped clean, the families gather. The women arrive with bowls and spoons carved from fig wood, baskets of grape syrup, rosewater, and shavings of pistachio. The kids buzz in excitement. The man with the orange beard returns. This time he's not supervising, he's serving. They scoop small chunks of ice into bowls, drizzle it with syrup, and hand it out. The texture is coarse, more granita than gelato, but it's deeply satisfying. Cool. Fragrant. Slightly smoky from the clay. You're eating Bastani before Bastani was cool. And here comes a quirky cultural moment for you. Some families dip bread into the ice to wake it up. Others press herbs into it, mint, basil, or even crushed violet petals. Each household has their own secret ritual. One girl laughs as her cousin gets a brain freeze and immediately holds his forehead like he's seen a vision. The old women cluck gently. Too fast, one says. You have to listen to the cold. The men don't talk much. They eat, wipe their beards, and stare into the sun that's rising, ready to burn down everything they've just made. But not yet. For now the cold holds. You lean back again, watching the morning unfold. You're full, not from food exactly, but from a strange sense of trust. These people know how to live inside their limits. They don't fight the heat, they shape around it. They plan for it. They leave space for night, and they borrow from it gently. Historians still debate whether these communal ice days were festivals or simply routine. There are no surviving laws that formalize the gatherings, yet in nearly every village with a yakshal, there are local songs about the first ice, the best harvest, the bowl that cracked from too much cold. So maybe it wasn't law, it was just love. You stretch your legs, dangle your fingers in the last trickle of meltwater pooling by the basin, and close your eyes. In the distance, a bell rings, not sharp, just steady. Another day begins. But it begins cooler, calmer. Because of this quiet miracle in the desert. You walk a little farther now, away from the village square and its emptied basin, your footsteps slow in the warming dust. The celebration has ended, but the hum of daily life begins. Noisy? Not exactly. Persian mornings are unhurried, like the breath before a line of poetry. Down a side path, you find yourself alongside a man with broad shoulders and a cart made entirely of woven reeds and bent wood. It creaks with each bump. Inside, not produce or clay pots, but ice. Slabs of it, packed in straw and wrapped in cloth, stacked like shimmering bricks. You're about to spend a day in his sandals. He's a laborer, maybe 30, maybe 50. It's hard to tell in this climate. The sun tends to stretch and shrink the years in strange ways. His name is probably something solid and dependable like Darius or Furboars. Let's call him that. Furboars the Iceman. He delivers ice, not with a song or fanfare but with quiet steps, a stiff back and a firm grip on time. Because with every hour that passes, the sun claims more of his cargo. Furboars starts before dawn. Always. He arrives at the yakshal when the air still bites your nose and the stars haven't blinked out. He lights a small oil lamp, just enough to see by. The ice is drawn from the pit with care, wrapped in palm leaf sheaths that stick slightly to his fingertips. He places them into the cart like sleeping infants. Then he goes. His route is the same each day, though the details shift. First, he visits the baker, who uses a cooled chamber to preserve milk and ghee. Then to the spice vendor, whose rose petal syrup mustn't curdle before noon. Finally, he makes his way to the wealthier homes, where ladies in linen scarves await chilled sherbet water for their mid-morning rest. You follow him through alleyways dotted with fig trees, their waxy leaves hissing gently in the breeze. A donkey tied nearby eyes him lazily. A cat darts under a clay bench. A child leans out a window and shouts, "Furboars. Is it sweet today?" Furboars grunts something close to yes. A woman steps from a doorway and offers him a dish of stewed plums as payment. He accepts it wordlessly. She gets her portion of ice in return. Not measured by weight or purity but by intuition, by what the day allows. Want an unusual detail? In some cities, icemen like furboars used hollow reeds, nay borden, to blow into the cloth bundles, testing for melt by the echo. A sharp whistle meant solid ice. A dull murmur meant disappointment. You arrive with him at a tiled courtyard, one of the wealthier homes. The servant accepts the ice and disappears without a word, but someone lingers by the gate. A girl, maybe 15, maybe younger. She watches furboars with curious eyes, not admiration exactly, but a kind of thoughtful curiosity. She asks him if it's true that the ice comes from a mountain trapped underground. He shakes his head but doesn't explain further. Sometimes mystery is colder than truth. As you continue, the sun begins to creep higher, and the corners of the cart start to darken. Meltwater seeps into the straw. Furboar speeds up. One stop left, the physician. Not a doctor like we know it. This man is a hakim, part herbalist, part poet, part philosopher. He believes that cold balances bile, that ice calms the liver, that snow packed onto the soles of feet can reduce fever. He greets furboars with a smile and places the day's bundle into a stone bowl lined with crushed myrtle leaves. You notice a scroll on his table. It's been partially unrolled. On it, a diagram of a human figure with channels drawn from the head to the stomach. One of them is labeled Wind of Sleep. Beside it, a note, only opens when touched by cold. Historians still argue whether Persian medicine truly incorporated cold therapies or whether this was a poetic addition layered on later manuscripts. Some evidence supports ice being used in spiritual purification rituals. Others believe it was simply practical: cool the skin, wake the body, preserve the blood. Back outside, the day is heating up. Furboars is finished. He stops beneath a low canopy, leans against a shaded wall, and unwraps the last cloth. Inside is a sliver of ice, barely enough to cool a coin. He doesn't eat it. Instead, he presses it against his neck, closes his eyes, and breathes in. One moment of silence. One reward. You sit beside him, both of you resting in the dappled shade, surrounded by the faint scent of cumin, dates, and straw. The ice is almost gone, but the cool still lingers. The streets grow quieter now, not because the city is sleeping, but because everyone has retreated into shade. You feel the rhythm of the day shift. Afternoon in ancient Persia is an art form, not a time of day. It's when the world narrows down to courtyards, slow fans, and the gentle clink of cups filled with chilled rosewater. You follow the scent of something sweet. Not sugary sweet, but floral, subtle, ancient. You pass through a wooden doorway carved with simple geometric patterns and into a courtyard cooled by tall mud brick walls and a whispering fountain. The air is thick with cardamom, crushed mint, and something else. Snow? A woman, middle-aged, with silver streaks in her braid, is gently folding strands of vermicelli into a ceramic bowl. Her sleeves are rolled up, and beside her sits a block of ice, slowly sweating into a ring-shaped puddle. She sprinkles something golden, saffron maybe, over the noodles and looks up with a smile that says, "Yes, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bastani." But not the creamy modern version that comes in plastic tubs. This is something older, stranger, more ephemeral. She scoops the mix of vermicelli, semi-frozen syrup, and perfumed ice into a shallow brass bowl, presses it down gently, and offers it to an invisible guest. Maybe you, maybe a memory. A child darts past, trailing laughter and sticky fingers. You sit nearby and watch her repeat the process. Each bowl is different. One with grape syrup. One with honey and a curl of orange zest. Another with petals, real, edible rose petals, dried and crumbled like soft confetti. This is Faloodeh, possibly the oldest frozen dessert still eaten today. Originating in ancient Persia, it predates ice cream by centuries. And unlike modern desserts, Faloodeh was seasonal, intentional, even slightly sacred. You take an imaginary bite. It's icy but it melts fast. The noodles are chewy but not rubbery. The sweetness isn't cloying. And the aftertaste? It's memory itself. Like something your grandmother once made and never wrote down. Here's a fringe historical tidbit. Some Persian cities kept detailed household calendars where the first Faloodeh of the season was marked with a red flower drawn in the corner. It wasn't just dessert, it was arrival. Of summer. Of leisure. Of poetry in a bowl. Historians still argue whether Faloodeh was originally medicinal. Some suggest its cooling properties were prescribed during heat stroke or excess liver fire, a phrase that sounds like either a serious condition or a fantastic album name. Others argue it was purely indulgent. After all, if you go through the trouble of harvesting ice in the desert, why wouldn't you celebrate with dessert? Back in the courtyard, more women join in. One rolls thin sheets of dough under a stone press, dusting them with cinnamon. Another fans the children as they sit on cool woven mats and sip from little bowls. A third reads a poem aloud, her voice soft and even. The rose remembers cold snow, and the tongue forgets the fire. When Bastani is passed around the circle, you don't know the words exactly, but you feel their truth. The food here doesn't just nourish, it lowers your temperature, body and soul. The woman with the saffron braid nods toward you. She motions to the bowl closest to the shade. This one's for you, she might be saying. You accept it silently, though your hands only hover in this story. You lift the brass bowl. It's cool against your fingertips. The first spoonful makes everything around you slow down. Even the birds above the courtyard wall seem to stop mid-wing beat. Bastani isn't flashy. It doesn't pile on flavors or drown in toppings. It whispers, remembers, it lingers. Another fun detail. Elite kitchens during the Sasanian Empire reportedly had servants whose only task during summer was to flavor ice. Their titles? Jewel duct or flower daughters. These women learned the art of infusion. Jasmine at twilight, orange blossom at noon, lavender only during the full moon. It's impossible to verify these titles. Some say they're poetic exaggerations, but even if half true, they speak volumes about the role of scent and subtlety in Persian dessert making. You finish your imaginary bowl and place it gently on the stone step. The children are giggling over who's melted first. One boy proudly displays a puddle in the shape of a horse. His sister insists it looks more like a donkey. The argument has no winners, just laughter. The fountain in the center gurgles softly, its splash echoing off sun-warmed walls. A vine of morning glory snakes down from the rooftop, brushing against a hanging clay lantern. You lean back, eyelids heavy, the scent of cardamom in your nose. If dreams had texture, this would be it. Cold noodles, warm poems, and the fading sound of Faloodeh melting in a forgotten bowl. The afternoon light begins to stretch long and golden across the walls as you rise from your spot in the courtyard, stomach full, figuratively speaking, of snow, saffron, and quiet joy. The sounds behind you soften into background hums. Laughter, the patter of feet, the distant clink of dishes being cleaned. You step back into the sunlit street, and now your path leads upward. Not spiritually, not metaphorically, geographically. You're heading toward the hills, just beyond the city, where the air thins, the breeze sharpens, and the royal palaces await. Because while the villagers take their ice in shared bowls and faded brass, the kings and satraps of the empire, they want their banquets frosty. You trudge slowly up the road carved by centuries of sandals, the slope gentle but persistent. Along the way you pass traders bringing crates of melons, bundles of mint, and sealed jugs of pomegranate syrup. One of them passes you by and jokes in Farsi, "You don't climb for the sun, you climb for the cold." And at the top, the royal estate spreads out, a mosaic of arches, gardens, and pale sandstone. The great dining hall is long and shaded, with sheer fabric fluttering from the high beams. It's early evening now, and the first course has begun to arrive. You slip into the shadows along the edge of the hall, unnoticed but welcome. Here the cold isn't just refreshing. It's symbolic. A king who can serve ice in July demonstrates control, not just over people but over nature itself. His reach extends from mountain snow to desert basin. He commands rivers you cannot see and winds you cannot name. This particular feast? A wedding celebration. The bride arrives on a litter of woven silk, carried by men with shaved heads and faces like statues. She's quiet, calm. Maybe sleepy. Maybe you are too. Then come the dishes. Lamb roasted with pistachios and plums, grape leaves stuffed with lemon and dill, and between each course, something cold. A bowl of chilled yogurt with crushed rose petals. Sliced cucumbers steeped in vinegar and ice shards. Melon balls packed with snow from that morning's harvest. And for the bride? A goblet of wine cooled with mountain snow, swirled with violet syrup. She raises it, takes a sip, and smiles only slightly as if to say, yes, this marriage will be bearable. Now here's a fact to savor. Persian royalty were known to send relays of runners from mountain slopes all the way to palace kitchens, carrying snow wrapped in thick felt or packed in beeswax-lined crates. Some runners trained for months. Their reward? A pouch of coins and first pick of the leftover melon rinds. One account claims King Darius once delayed a feast until the snow came down from Ecbatana. Was this ice literal or code for an honored guest? Historians still argue. But the ice was likely real. Because this wasn't just a feast, it was theater. Each bowl of sorbet, each frosted cup, each puff of steam rising from clay jugs pulled straight from underground chill. It all whispered the same thing. This king has the cold on his side. Now you wander through the palace garden, where an elaborate series of water channels crisscross under shade trees. In the center sits a basin no more than 2 feet deep, filled with water so still it reflects the stars above before they even appear. These water features weren't just decorative. They worked in tandem with the wind catchers and subterranean tunnels to cool the air around the banquet space. And at night? The nobles dipped their hands in the basin between courses, or placed garlands of wet myrtle around their necks for added chill. One guest, plump, powdered and 3 goblets in, leans back and declares, "Only in Persia can the air taste like ice." His neighbors laugh. Not loudly. Just enough. A musician begins to play the ney, a reed flute with a voice like a sigh. It blends with the rustle of trees and the faint drip 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 of condensation falling into bronze bowls. You notice a detail carved into one of the palace columns. A frost flower, etched delicately into the stone. Below it, a line of poetry. Even the sun bows. Where snow sleeps in clay. A fringe tidbit? Some palaces kept ice gardens, miniature yachtals ringed with marble seats and flowering vines. Nobles would sit around the icy mound, sip honey tea, and debate philosophy until the melt soaked through the rugs beneath their feet. It was considered charming, not an inconvenience. You trail behind a servant carrying a dessert platter to the bridal suite. Frozen cream blended with saffron and date syrup, wrapped in grape leaves. A note tucked beside it reads, "For sweetness and stillness." By the time the moon fully rises, the feast is fading. Candles gutter. Dancers slow. The last goblet of snow wine is poured, and the king, barefoot now, walking among friends, steps carefully around a bowl of melting ice and says, "Let's not waste the cold. Tell a story." No one refuses a king's request. So a story begins. And the ice continues to melt. The palace slowly exhales its guests like a great lion curling up for sleep. Lanterns are snuffed. Pillows are rearranged. The last notes of the flute trail off into the warm, spiced air. And yet, as you drift down the hill again, you realize, the city isn't sleeping. Not entirely. It's just moving inward. You follow a narrow stone road winding through one of the city's older quarters. Homes here are clustered tightly like family. Their windows are high, small, and shielded from the sun. But what captures your attention now are the roofs. Look closer. See those rectangular chimneys? Not chimneys at all. They're badgers or wind catchers, one of Persia's most brilliant inventions. These vertical shafts are positioned to intercept even the gentlest breeze and funnel it into the home below. Some are simple, single-direction funnels. Others are elaborate, multi-vented, pivoted, designed to pull from whichever way the wind deigns to come. It's late, but one household has left a lantern glowing softly beneath their wind catcher. You can hear the air moving if you listen, like a sigh that's never quite finished. You enter the home, gently, invisibly, respectfully. Inside, the walls are thick and mud-plastered, whitewashed to reflect heat. The floor is stone. A woven mat sits in the corner, and beneath it, a sardab or cooling basement. Small. Just enough room to store food, or escape the noon blaze for a brief nap. A family of 5 moves slowly through their nighttime rituals. The father carefully pours water from a cool jar, its surface beaded with condensation. One daughter fetches rose water and pours a few drops into a shallow bowl. They'll place it in front of the wind catcher before bed. As the air moves across the surface, it lifts the scent and spreads it through the house. Ancient air freshener, perfumed cooling system, and lullaby all in one. The walls don't hum, but they breathe. Slowly. Purposefully. This house wasn't built to fight the climate. It was built to speak with it. Here's your historical grounding for the evening. Archaeological evidence of wind catchers dates back over 2,500 years. Yazd, a city in central Iran, still holds some of the oldest and tallest. In fact, the city's nickname is Shari Bajra, City of Wind Catchers. And historians still argue over who did it first. Some say the concept traveled from Egypt, where similar vents were found in desert dwellings. Others say it was purely Persian genius, perhaps emerging from early observations of cave cooling and channeled airflow. The debate never settled. But the wind never asked permission. You move through another home now. Here the walls are slightly curved. Concave recesses capture and funnel wind more efficiently. In the main room, a large ceramic jar sits embedded in the ground. Its surface is painted with blue patterns, birds and vines, and inside? Yogurt, thick and cool, resting silently like a secret. Another detail you might like. In some neighborhoods, wind corridors were built between homes. Narrow alleys designed not just for foot traffic but to intensify airflow. As the wind was compressed between the walls, its speed increased, feeding directly into the wind catchers and down into sardabs. Imagine that, entire districts engineered to function like lungs. And the sounds? Nothing mechanical. Just whispers. Just breeze. You pass one family's rooftop where laundry hangs like prayer flags. The cloth barely moves, but you can tell. There's wind. Subtle. Present. Guiding the temperature downward one invisible whisper at a time. Below, the ice harvested that morning has found its way to dozens of homes. Stored in clay pots, chipped into water jars, or used to chill cucumbers for tomorrow's stew. No one hoards it. It's too precious for that. It passes through hands like a borrowed blessing. There's a lovely superstition tied to this, that if you keep cold too long, it forgets how to serve. So you must use it. Share it. Release it back to the air from which it was coaxed. In the final house you pass, a baby sleeps in a hanging cradle. A low bowl of water rests nearby, catching air from the wind catcher. The room is quiet, still, scented with mint and patience. The mother sits nearby, half asleep, her fingers brushing through her child's hair. She hums something tuneless but comforting. You don't need to understand the words. The melody is the meaning. The walls around you hold on to coolness like a sigh saved for later. And outside, the wind continues its soft pilgrimage. From one tower to another, from dome to dome, from desert heat to sleeping hearts. You've wandered far now, past courtyards, banquet halls, wind catchers and iced melons, and the road before you widens. You're leaving the city's close breath behind and following the paths beyond. Because the cold didn't stay still in ancient Persia. It traveled. You step onto one of the dusty arteries of the empire, an old trade road, part of the sprawling web that would one day be called the Silk Routes. But tonight, your journey isn't about silk or spice. It's about ice, and how this delicate, short-lived luxury was traded across vast distances, packed tight into goatskin bags, hidden beneath woven mats, and carried by runners, camels, and carts through blistering sun. You're not walking alone. A caravan passes slowly, camels striding like boats over waves, bells jingling softly beneath their chins. One of the merchants nods at you, his face wrapped in cloth to guard against the wind. He carries, among bolts of fabric and bundles of saffron, a curious object, a wax-lined clay jar. Inside it, harvested days ago far to the west, and headed for the courts of Samarkand. That's right, ice on the move. Historians still marvel at how this was possible. Without refrigeration, how could perishable snow travel hundreds of miles? The secret lay in layered insulation. First, the ice was tightly packed in straw, then placed inside sealed jars, which were in turn placed in felt-lined baskets or crates. Finally, these were kept in the coolest sections of the caravan, often under woolens or near wet leather to help maintain humidity. And the couriers moved at night whenever possible. One poem from the 10th century tells of a prince receiving a bowl of Shiraz's morning frost on the eve of his wedding, in Herat. That's over 800 kilometers away. Was it real? Possibly. Was it legendary? Definitely. But the point remains, ice wasn't just a thing. It was a gesture, a sign of wealth, care, and patience. You walk beside the caravan now. One camel lets out a low, complaining groan, like a bathtub slowly draining. The merchant chuckles and tosses him a carrot. In the distance, another city rises. Not as grand as Persepolis or Babylon, but bustling just the same. You're entering a desert town built for trade, where goods, stories, and temperatures change hands. Inside a cramped shop, you find a rare treasure. A portable cooling box, its inside walls lined with clay tiles and fragments of sarouj, the same waterproof plaster used in the yakshals. It's not large, perhaps just big enough to hold a melon or two. But it's clever. A small spout at the base drains meltwater, and grooves on the sides let air circulate through the porous clay. You imagine it nestled beside a merchant's bedding, quietly sweating out its chill all through the night. Some historians believe these portable coolers were precursors to the travel thermos, used primarily by the wealthy or the particularly fastidious. Others argue they were household items adapted for travel in emergencies, births, long hunts, or high summer weddings. No consensus, just fragments and guesses. Here's a detail you might have missed. In cities with access to both trade and mountains, ice itself became currency. During years of drought, farmers could trade small blocks for tools, wine, even medical attention. Entire ice markets sprang up, early versions of seasonal farmers' markets, where blocks were cut, weighed, and wrapped in reeds. The sellers wore gloves made of camel hide. Their voices were always low. No one shouted in the ice market. You sit down beside one such stall, long since empty, its clay troughs now home to dry leaves and the occasional lizard. You imagine it full again, steam rising from crushed ice, eager hands exchanging coin for a handful of cool. One girl skips away with a single flake pressed to her forehead, laughing as if she's been crowned queen of the heat. The merchant sighs, leans on his elbow, and mumbles, "Only the mountains are honest." And you know what he means. Because even now, the cold you've been chasing didn't start here. It started higher up, where the snow still clings to the peaks like forgotten turbans on sleeping giants. You look to the horizon, where the mountains rise pale against the stars. Somewhere up there, beneath a shadowed ridge, more ice is waiting. Waiting to fall, to melt, to be caught and kept and carried again. And so the journey continues, not just yours but the journey of cold itself. Down slopes, through stone canals, across sun-bleached valleys, into clay jars, onto silver trays, back into a single drop of sweet snow melting on the tongue of a tired prince. You rest for a while beneath a cypress tree outside the city walls. The wind is soft, the earth still warm. But beneath your hand, the surface of the soil feels just a bit cooler than it should. A promise. The cold remembers its way home. Night falls again, softer this time, like a shawl draped over your shoulders by someone who knows you well. The stars blink their slow, predictable greetings. You're far from where you started, No longer in the bustling kitchens or shadowed wind catchers. Now your steps carry you toward the edges of knowledge, into the realm where myth and engineering braid together. You're approaching a small village nestled in the folds of dry hills. The homes here are simpler, the streets quieter. But at the center of the square stands a yakshul, older, smaller, and shaped slightly differently. Not the towering, smooth-walled dome you remember, but something more irregular. Crooked bricks, inset stone carvings. A faint echo when you circle around it. A boy sits nearby, carving tiny animals from a lump of cold clay. He tells you without looking up that this one is different. This one was not built by masons. This one was given. By what? By those who live under sand. Here we go. You found the stories. In this village, the yakshul isn't just a fridge. It's sacred. And weird. And possibly alive. The locals call it yaki jin, or the jin's ice. They say the dome was once a hill that refused to heat. Travelers would rest near it during summer and wake up chilled. Eventually, someone dug into the hill and found frost beneath clay. The ice of the jinn, they said, gifted to men who stopped asking so many questions. Historians still argue whether such legends were invented post-fact to explain clever construction, or whether they reflect a genuine awe of pre-scientific design. Perhaps it's both. The human mind likes symmetry. If a dome cools, then surely it was cooled on purpose, and maybe not by human hands. You sit beside the boy who has finished carving a fox. He whispers another tale, a mason who built a yakshul without the proper blessing. That winter no ice formed. The dome remained hot to the touch. He tore it down himself in shame. The lesson? Even cold needs permission. Inside the structure, things are odd. There are symbols painted on the interior, long faded. They don't match any known script. A few resemble constellations. Others look like inverted trees. There's no official record of this yakshul in any royal archive. The villagers say it grew before books. No one builds it. They tend it, patch the cracks, replace missing bricks. But the foundation was always there. You crouch down and touch the floor. It's not cold, not exactly, but it wants to be. As if the stone itself is waiting for winter, even when there is none. One fringe theory, offered by a French archaeologist in the 19th century, suggested that some of these structures might have originated from earlier, non-Persian civilizations entirely. Tribes that left behind no writing, only architecture. Perhaps they stumbled upon radiative cooling by accident, left a bowl of water out overnight and woke to ice, and spent the next generation building domes to preserve the miracle. Another theory? Some believe certain yakshuls were designed not just for storage, but for spiritual alignment. Built facing star paths, aligned with solstice shadows. One example near Kerman lines up perfectly with the summer sunset. Is it coincidence? Design? Wishful thinking? You lie down on the inner ledge of this peculiar dome. The ceiling above curves like a firmament. In the faint light from a single hanging lantern, you can almost see frost gathering in patterns, lines and spirals that vanish when you blink. You hear the boy outside still talking softly. He's telling the clay fox about another story, one where the cold was stolen from the mountains by a clever servant girl who traded her shadow for snow. Every year the cold comes back looking for her. You smile. Truth lives in both facts and fairy tales. And here, in the hollow belly of a dome older than names, they seem to get along just fine. You close your eyes. Not to sleep, not quite. But to listen better. The dome makes no sound. Not even wind. But you feel it, a stillness that isn't empty. Like the breath before an idea. This place, like the cold it holds, isn't loud. It doesn't demand your attention. It waits. The dome fades behind you now, but its coolness lingers faintly in your clothes, in the tiny hollow between your collarbone and neck, in the soft skin of your wrists. You walk on, back toward the lived-in parts of the world, the courtyards and cook fires, the whispering women and yawning goats. Tonight, your path bends through a residential lane, narrower than before, with steps carved into the earth and walls streaked with generations of smoke and chalky fingerprints. Here you're not in temples of engineering or palaces of kings. You're in the kitchens where the real life of a civilization simmers. You arrive at a modest home just as a woman opens the door with her elbow, both arms cradling bowls of soaked lentils. She nearly bumps into you if you were real, and sighs, "Oh, these steps." She disappears inside and you follow without hesitation. The kitchen is dim but alive. A small oil lamp flickers near the hearth. Dried herbs hang from ceiling beams. Mint, thyme, tarragon. Two sisters knead dough while arguing softly about how salty the brine cucumbers should be. A grandmother sits in the corner, stirring a clay pot with an old copper spoon, mumbling what sounds like a recipe and a prayer. At the center of it all, a squat storage jar half buried in the ground. Its outer shell is ribbed for airflow. A thin layer of condensation clings to its surface like dew on a leaf. You already know what's inside: ice. Not for dessert. Not today. Today it's for preserving. Wrapped inside linen, kept just above the melt line, is a small bundle of trout, caught upstream 2 days ago and still smelling faintly of river stones. Beside it, a jar of rose syrup sits like a jeweled offering, preserved not just in sugar but in coolness earned with effort. The women work quietly but efficiently. Every gesture calibrated, every ingredient placed with care. No clanging. No waste. Even the scraps are sorted. Some for the fire, some for the goats, some for the soil. You notice something else now. There are ice rules in this house. A set of unwritten protocols passed through glances and gestures. Only the oldest daughter lifts the lid. Only the youngest can refill the cloths. No one wastes. No one touches with warm hands. The grandmother, who hasn't stood all day, still straightens when she hears the lid creak. It's not fear. It's respect. Here's a quiet truth. Cold changes how people eat, store, and live. And long before modern refrigeration, this little clay jar, and others like it, shifted the rhythm of Persian kitchens. Leftovers became possible. Milk stayed longer. Certain herbs retained their brightness. Even doughs could be rested longer in the cool corner of the pantry. One charming fringe detail: in some households the cold jar was given a name. Usually something gentle and poetic like Sabzina, little green thing, or Delband, heart's embrace. Children would be scolded not for taking ice, but for not thanking her afterward. You pause beside the jar now, listening. It crackles faintly as the ice inside adjusts to the air. A soft sound like fingers brushing silk. You imagine how many hands have touched this same rim. How many recipes began right here, by lifting a lid and finding a little square of winter waiting patiently. The sisters begin shaping small dumplings filled with mint and onion. The older one takes a chip of ice and presses it against her wrist. "Cools the blood," she mutters. You're not sure if she means physically or metaphorically. The grandmother begins humming a lullaby. Not for anyone in particular, just the room. Maybe the dumplings. Maybe the jar. You glance into the corner of the kitchen where a toddler sleeps in a nest of cushions. Near his head is a bowl of cool water that's been left near the windcatcher vent. Not icy. Not even cold. Just less warm. It will help him breathe easier through the night. Historians still argue how early domestic refrigeration practices spread among the lower classes. Was it imitation of palace trends? Or did necessity invent its own cool logic from the bottom up? Some believe traveling herbalists carried these techniques across villages. Others suggest it was the women, mothers, cooks, midwives, who passed the knowledge wordlessly, bowl to bowl, house to house. You lean against the doorframe as the kitchen continues to hum. The air smells of cumin and charcoal and something else. Intentionality. A deliberate life. A measured day. You hear the older sister laugh. She's tied a cloth of melting snow around her forehead and declared herself Queen of Summer. The others roll their eyes, but no one disagrees. Because in this little room, surrounded by steam and stories, cold is royalty. And even though no one's saying it, every person here is quietly grateful for the yakshal, the wind, the basin, the boy who carved the fox, and the patience of those who kept the tradition alive one chipped block at a time. You step back outside, the door creaking softly behind you, and the air feels warmer already. You leave the kitchen lanes behind, retracing your steps with the sleepy weight of someone carrying a warm loaf wrapped in cloth, except you're carrying memories instead. You pass the yakshal again, silent as ever, and weave through alleys that begin to hum with a different kind of conversation. Tonight, you're walking into a city with something to prove. It starts subtly. The yakshal here is taller, broader at the base. Its dome polished with a finer layer of plaster, perhaps mixed with ash or pomegranate rind. On one side, a painted tile glimmers faintly in the moonlight, depicting a white crane sipping from a bowl of snow. This yakshal clearly is not just for keeping ice. It's part of the city's pride. Welcome to the world of rival ice domes. You hear it in the way two elderly men argue outside a tea house, each convinced that their neighborhood's yakshal holds ice longer, colder, purer. One claims his dome could hold a block from Nowruz to Mer, that's early spring to mid-autumn. The other scoffs, waving his spoon like a sword, ours could hold ice through the Shah's birthday and the Prophet's tears. You slip inside the tea house, drawn by the scent of cinnamon and gentle absurdity. The walls are covered in scrolls and sketches, blueprints of domes and ductwork, crisscrossed with measurements, arrows and scribbled poetry. One of them reads, "Where the shadow falls longest, there sleeps the proudest frost." It's both brag and blueprint. You learn quickly that in ancient Persian cities, yakshals weren't just municipal structures. They were regional mascots. Each district took fierce pride in its design. Its curve, its cooling time, the smoothness of its interior surface, the insulation of its trench. Entire cold guilds formed around their construction and maintenance. And yes, they competed. Ice harvesting contests were held at dawn, where rival teams would weigh their remaining blocks after a full week of summer heat. The dome with the least melt got crowned that year's winter and summer champion. The reward? A new ceramic tile above the entry, sometimes inscribed with lines like, "He who touches this wall finds shade in his soul." Here's a delightful fringe detail. In the city of Ray, one yakshal bore a carved marble plaque with nothing but a date and a single word, "Unmelted." The year? 1192. That's the year it allegedly survived 40 days without replenishment during a siege. Historians can't confirm the plaque's age. Some think it was added centuries later, a kind of civic myth turned monument. But you don't really need proof, do you? Because the story is cool enough. You walk deeper into the district. Murals adorn the walls here. Images of wind catchers swirling like musical notes, smiling children catching flakes of ice in open hands, even a cat curled beside a tiny clay cooler, its paws iced. You pass a courtyard where an amateur poet is reciting verses about the cold queen of Shiraz, supposedly a yakshal that whispered to those who sat near her long enough. Her voice, he claims, sounded like dripping water and forgotten lullabies. His audience? A trio of old women playing backgammon and occasionally correcting his meter. One calls out, "That queen cracked in 73. Too proud. Didn't take her plaster seriously." And everyone nods. Even legends have maintenance schedules. You round a corner and find another dome, this one crowned with colorful glazed tiles in a spiral pattern. Decorative, yes, but also functional. The reflective surface helped bounce sunlight away, reducing heat absorption. A clever twist of vanity and science. Historians still debate whether decorative domes were a late cultural flourish or whether the earliest yakshal builders understood how color and surface texture could aid cooling. Some believe artisans competed just as fiercely as the engineers, lobbying to get their signature patterns embedded into the domes of record. You lean against a wall near the city square and watch the bustle of nighttime life. A boy selling plum ice from a wheeled cart, kept chilled by a chunk taken from the day's harvest. Lovers walking slowly, passing a sliver of snow back and forth between fingers like a secret. A grandfather dozing beside a bowl of half-melted slush. The whole city smells slightly of chill, like the ghost of a snowstorm that refuses to leave. You ask yourself, why did these cities care so much? Why the rivalry? The measurements? The poems and plaques? The answer isn't pride. Not entirely. It's memory. These domes kept more than ice. They held proof that time could be bent, that a day's harvest in winter could live on through the teeth of summer, if only you built the walls thick enough, angled the dome just right, and respected the stillness inside. They weren't bragging. They were preserving hope. And in doing so they turned engineering into poetry. By now you've walked through stories. Through steam and wind, saffron and silence, domes and dreams. But like all things shaped by hands and seasons, the cold age of Persia could not last forever. Tonight you drift toward the edge of a newer settlement, one still wearing the bones of its older self. Clay walls now patched with cement. Mud brick courtyards strung with wires. A wind catcher that stands, yes, but no longer breathes. Its mouth sealed shut with wooden boards. You come upon a yakshul, abandoned, half buried in sand. The dome cracked, leaning slightly to one side like a sleeping camel. You duck inside, careful not to disturb the bats that flit softly in the eaves. The floor is dry. The pit is filled with rubble. The cold is gone. And yet, in this quiet, broken space you hear echoes. You can almost feel the shape of what it held. That odd hush, the reverent chill, the breath of night that once curled beneath its dome. This place was not defeated by heat. It was forgotten by progress. You step back out and sit in the shadow of its crumbling wall. Let's talk about what happened. The fall of the Yakshuls wasn't sudden. It was slow, like meltwater seeping through straw. First came the political shifts. Wars, invasions, dynasties falling and rising like waves. When the Mongols arrived in the 13th century, they scorched more than fields. They disrupted the careful, slow systems that Yakshuls depended on. Stable trade, local engineering guilds, peace long enough to build and wait for winter. Then came modernity. Iron pipes, gas stoves, ice factories, mechanical refrigeration. The first ice plants appeared in Iran during the late 19th century, brought by European engineers eager to demonstrate their blinking machines. These factories didn't care about sun angles or dome plaster or nighttime wind. They hummed and churned and froze water in hours. You didn't have to wait for winter. You didn't have to build anything taller than your shoulder. You just paid the bill. And people did. Why wouldn't they? Historians still argue whether the collapse of ancient cooling systems represents a loss of culture or a triumph of accessibility. After all, cold became democratized. Anyone could buy a block of ice. Eventually, anyone could open a fridge. No need to chant to the frost. No need to pass down the angle of the trench from father to son. Just twist a dial. And with every twist, a little more of the old system cracked, faded, slipped quietly into the dust. But here's the twist. Some resisted. In villages too remote for power lines, Yakshuls remained. Not just as relics but as working tools. A few were patched up, replastered. Their channels dug out by grandsons who'd only ever seen cold and glass doors at city shops. And sometimes, they worked. One elderly woman in Kerman swore by hers. Said her yogurt kept better, her rice never turned sour. Said the dome understood her pace. You like that? Because maybe that's what the Yakshul really offered. Not just cold, but a relationship with time. It asked you to wait. To gather. To know your angles. To track the stars. To understand the night. Your fingers trace the edge of a broken tile near your seat. The glaze is worn, but you make out part of a line. Even in heat, the earth remembers. You rest your back against the warm clay and look toward the edge of town, where blinking lights flicker across the flat roof of a convenience store. A boy walks out holding a bottled soda, condensation pooling at the rim. He opens it, takes a sip, doesn't even look up. Not ungrateful. Just unaware. The cold has become so easy now that it doesn't even feel like magic anymore. But you know better. You close your eyes and remember a time when cold had to be earned. Dug from the night. Caught in wind. Sealed in silence. You wonder how many domes still stand out there, half buried, half remembered. You wonder if they miss us, or if they're still waiting, quietly, for the return of hands patient enough to build the curve again. The final stretch of your journey begins not with footsteps, but with silence. The kind that feels earned. You walk now into a narrow valley nestled between crumbling hills. The wind here is calm, the air strangely still, as if even nature has paused to listen. And there, tucked against the rise of rock and earth, is one last yakshul. Not broken. Not abandoned. Still standing. You step closer. Its dome is smoother than the others you've seen. Recently plastered, recently touched. A fig tree leans gently toward its base, its roots respectful of the foundation. A child's toy, an old wooden top, rests beside the entry ramp. Someone was just here. You peer inside, expecting dust and emptiness. But no. The pit has been cleared. Inside, a modest mound of ice glows faintly in the filtered light from a small, high window. A folded mat sits nearby. A broom leans against the wall. There's even a notebook resting on a flat stone. You pick it up, just gently, and flip through pages of sketches. Cross-sections of domes. Ice harvesting schedules. Even little doodles of camels with snowball hats. This isn't a monument. This is a working cold house. You step back outside, awed by the stubbornness of tradition. The resilience of craft. The whisper of, "We still remember." A voice breaks the quiet. An old man, barefoot, with a linen cap and sun-creased eyes, steps out from behind the fig tree. He doesn't seem startled. Just mildly amused to find you standing there like a misplaced thought. He nods once, walks past you, opens the yakshul's door and looks inside. Satisfied, he closes it again. Then he speaks. "This one's been here since my grandfather's grandfather." You ask gently why he still keeps it. He shrugs. "Because I can. Because it works. Because the ice is better when it takes its time." You sit together on a stone ledge nearby. He tells you stories, not with pride but with patience. How in the worst summer of his childhood, his mother pressed a single ice chip against his neck, and he swore he heard it sing. How he once carved a bird out of a melting block and watched it vanish before his sister could see it. How he doesn't trust fridges. Too noisy. Too quick. He doesn't mind the extra work. The digging. The patching. The cold hands in the early morning. He says, it's not just ice. It's a rhythm. You ask if others in the village still use it. He shakes his head slowly. Some tried. Most forgot. But he doesn't sound bitter. He pours you a cup of water, drawn from a clay jug stored inside the dome. It tastes clean. Cool. Kind. The kind of cold that doesn't startle the teeth. The kind of cold that waits. As you sip, the sky above turns the shade of a fig's inner skin, deep purple fading to starlight. He begins to hum. A familiar tune. You've heard it before, haven't you? It was the boy near the basin. The woman stirring her pot. The workers lifting blocks under moonlight. The cradle rocking near the windcatcher vent. This is the song of the slow cold. Of care passed hand to hand. Of clay domes and snow syrup. Of breath held beneath curved ceilings. And you realize now, even if the world forgets, even if machines roar louder and colder than any night wind ever could, somewhere the yakshul still stands. In memory. In myth. In muscle. You thank the man and he smiles without answering. As if he knows you're not really here. As if you never truly left the first dome. He returns to the fig tree and you lean back against the earth. The wind stirs gently, picking up a single dry leaf and spinning it toward the horizon. You've reached the end. Not a conclusion but a full circle. The dome, the basin, the boy, the bowl of Faloodeh, the prince's goblet, the poet's tile, the grandmother's whisper. They're all part of this echo. A cold echo, soft and slow and deeply, wonderfully boring. You close your eyes. And let the last breath of night slip gently over your skin like a silk blanket drawn from deep, dark earth. So now the wind quiets. The domes return to stillness, the stars settle into their corners of the sky, and the last sliver of moon rests lightly on the desert's edge. There's no more walking to do. No more stories to unearth. You've been through the hum of heat, the hush of frost, the laughter of melon sellers and the creak of ice being pulled from ancient pits. You've wandered slowly and curiously through a world shaped not by speed, but by rhythm, by care and clay and quiet invention. And now, the chill that once clung to the tips of your fingers fades gently into a memory. The kind that doesn't vanish, it just nestles in deeper, softer. Let your breath grow slower. Let your body sink heavier into the space you've chosen to rest. Maybe there's a fan humming softly in the background. Maybe your window's cracked just enough to let in night air. Or maybe, if you're lucky, you can almost hear it. That distant trickle of meltwater in a clay basin. The sound of a city falling asleep beside its own forgotten miracle. And here, in this space between fact and fable, you are safe. And held. As still as ice. As quiet as dust. As timeless as a dome made by hands who knew what it meant to wait. Sweet dreams.